Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Siddhartha Khosla, the six-time Emmy-nominated composer for Hulu's Only Murders in the Building and the new Paramount Plus espionage thriller Rabbit Hole. Sid, let's start by talking about Only Murders, which earned you a pair of Emmy nominations last year for its first season. Did you change up the score at all for season two?
Well, thank you first for having me, Ray. Appreciate it. And yeah, you know what? Season two of Only Murders, we definitely expanded the sound of the show. It got bigger, and one reason was logistical as well. Season one, with the pandemic, we had a whole different set of restrictions in terms of how many musicians we could have together in a room. We have string players, we had woodwind players, people blowing things out of their mouths to make sounds, and it's not a very COVID friendly environment. But last season, we got to have everybody in the room again together, and we had a much larger ensemble. And we did a bunch of our recordings, at great studios like Capitol Records, East West, and a bunch of other like wonderful, wonderful places. So we the sound got bigger, and last season, season two seemed like there was just a such a deeper sort of emotional thread through the season. There was a lot of melancholy. There was a lot of sort of sadness, and um, there's people's backstories, like Bunny's backstory. And so there were all these moments where the show sort of got deeper into the lives of our characters, and so the score had to follow suit. So we definitely expanded on season one stuff, new themes, um, a lot more mystery. It was a very score heavy season. And then, yeah, I mean, then there was vocal stuff that was so much fun in the season too. We had an opera singer join us at the end of episode nine. We had yodelers in 10. I mean, so it was all over the place, but it was very, very fun and exciting.
So because you were kind of unleashed, it was probably a better score all in all for season two because you weren't limited. You had everybody together. You weren't necessarily restricted to just a funny, quirky storyline. It was all over the map.
Yeah, it just, look, here's the thing. I wouldn't say it was, better or worse. It was just different. We had sort of like either way. I think what we did in first season still served the story as well as it could. And sometimes there's a charm to being smaller with the sound and the ensemble, and then sometimes you want the scope and the size. And last season certainly made that possible for me to do. Um, and I think also based on the success of season one, there's just there's a wonderful sort of like communication and conversation that we have with the executives at 20th and Hulu and Disney, and who are just some of the most amazing people I've gotten to work with in the music department there, who are also very supportive, who are just like, we see what you're trying to do, and keep on doing it and do more of it, and the showrunners and John, you know um, Hoffman and Dan Fogelman and Jess Rosenthal and our team, just everyone just saying, go do your thing. We saw what you were trying to do and keep on doing it, and so that's encouraging. And
Wow,
nothing.
that's got to be incredibly encouraging. I still hear people rave about the main title theme for Only Murders and how perfect it is, for the quirky tone of that series. You probably get compliments on that every day.
Oh, that is just like, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, that was just, that moment of the score and the music and the visuals coming together was just sort of like our lightning in a bottle moment for the show. Because, that little, I'll play it again, but that, right? And then, so
Oh my
that
God, I got chills from that. That was wonderful.
that theme, thank you. That theme, just it had that thing to it where if you wanted to, it could be, it can be sad. and melancholic, but then it can give you the sort of like bounce and the excitement, and so the theme sort of is very malleable in that sense, and so it sort of could really thread through series in a fun way, and that was something John Hoffman was just like, that's my theme, He's like, I want it everywhere.
Well, I know you got an Emmy nomination for that last year. How could you not have won? What does a guy got to do to win one of these things?
It's funny. I'm. If you told me, 6 years ago that I would have had Emmy nominations for shows, I wouldn't have believed you. And so I think the fact that I'm even in that company with all these people, there's amazing artists doing scores for television, and it's just honored. It's great to be part of that community, and it's awesome. I think for us too, it's like the Only Murders theme is like, we were going up against like the 1 hour drama heavyweights, and
Yep.
so even have a place in that was very cool. That means people are like listening to the score and noticing that it's different, and it's unique in its own special way, and that's been really nice to have people in the community. A lot of people in our musician community just you know, really excited for us and what we're doing, and also asking questions of like, how are you getting this sound, or what did you do? So that's been a conversation I've had with a lot of composers, and that's been very cool. So
So, Sid, over the past year, you've also added the score for Rabbit Hole to your repertoire. It's obviously far different than what you do for Only Murders, namely like seemingly heavy strings and kind of this urgent driving beat that speaks to the
yep.
suspense and action and chaos. What were your marching orders for that?
Well, Rabbit Hole is created by John Requa and Glenn Ficarra, and who also directed the series and directed most of the episodes in our first season. And John and Glenn and I, we worked together on the pilot of This Is Us. They were the directors on that pilot, and those guys have such a unique vision, and they are some of the coolest directors I've ever worked with, and I'm such a fan of their work, and they they wanted to make something here with the music that that was just unsettling. Like that there was this sort of like there's a constant tension. There's an underbelly to this corporate, espionage sort of like world that they're in. That Kiefer Sutherland is sort of like kind of like that he's running in this world, um, and I think we when I read that pilot script, I called them and I was just like, this is like, I feel like this reminds me of the game or something, and they were like, oh my God, that's exactly the reference that we had in mind, and one of the references we had in mind, and they were sort of like evoking the '70s thriller as well in many ways, and they gave me a lot of freedom to sort of just find a sound and create stuff. They also had ideas in their head of what they wanted stuff to feel like, and they shared with me. Um, but but there was a lot of it. I felt like I was making an album. It was. Uh, I recorded a lot of the synth sounds you hear are recorded from my voice, processed through distortions and reverbs, and like I would in like a recording studio where we're making our own sounds for things. So a
So you
lot of
literally
it's
made your own sound effects.
yeah. I sort of like um, I think having been in a band, which is sort of where my career started, you're sort of trained. And I worked with wonderful engineers. This guy Jeff Peters, who like I learned like everything from Jeff, and that was always like, we want to make our own sounds in the studios. Like everybody has access to the same keyboards, the synthesizers. Everybody can buy it. It's there, right? Everybody who can afford to buy it buys it and uses it. And so your sort of like trick as an artist is like always like trying to figure out like, how can I make a sound that um, that only I can make, and that is something that I've spent time creating, and so that's what this show was for me. We did a lot of that where my vocals were, I would sing, do oh oh oh, 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 no, no, no. And it was like I would sample it and distort it, and all of a sudden, when you hear it, you think it's like an analog synthesizer, but it's actually my voice. And and so there was a lot of that sort of experimentation that Glenn and John were like, go for it. Find this sort of super tense sound that's in between score and sound design and that feels just like unsettling constantly. And so I went with it and did that. And there were also these emotional moments too in the show that we got to play with. But again, live orchestra on that show. There was sort of like a page, I think there was like influences for me were like Penderecki, and that who Johnny Greenwood is inspired by as well, and stuff I've watched of Johnny, um, and so it's like orchestras like hitting their violins in like uncomfortable ways that almost sound like percussion, and it's almost like they're abusing their instruments to create the sounds. And so we did a lot of that where stuff felt pretty frenetic and like out there, and very very proud of what we did. There's a ton of score in that show too. I mean, the
There
finale had
is.
51 minutes of score in the finale, if I remember. So it was a
Wow.
lot.
And it really does match that sense of foreboding and unsettling nature that you were going for really does match the tone of the show. I mean, it's really kind of a perfectly seamless blend.
Thank you. We
Um,
tried. We tried hard.
I've heard you say that you before that you approach your work on shows like a songwriter as much as a composer. How did that come into play in Rabbit Hole?
I think what it is that as a songwriter, I've always treated melody to be the sort of guiding light of whatever I do. Like in a song, the melody that the singer is singing is the hook, you know? Sometimes the hook can happen in the guitars and other instruments as well. Not to say it doesn't happen there. So it's melody, whether it's in the vocal, whether it's in the guitars, or whether it's in the piano. And Rabbit Hole had that. There was that. There was plenty of that. There's a da 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 da, like Weir's sort of like childhood theme. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. And we kept on going back to that motif throughout. So it's little things like that, even in sort of this like in a thriller like this, where you can still do that and have a little earworm. And I approach that in Only Murders too, is obviously like that is just that is a hook, and we come back to, and so, and I know that, and This Is Us when I worked on that show, we did that for 6 years. That really was all about themes. So I think for me it's theme, theme, theme. It's just sort of the guiding light of it all.
You're gonna have to do all your interviews at the piano now. I mean, this really works perfectly for you.
Well, I have to also because this is where I have the best best service.
No, you got absolutely. Speaking of This Is Us, talk about what writing the score for that show season after season did turbocharge your composing career.
Man, that was just
Four Emmy
that.
nominations for that too.
What's that?
Four Emmy nominations for that too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a labor of love. That show, I got to work with my one of my closest friends, Dan Fogelman. And so Dan and I have known each other since freshman year of college, and so I always say that I've known him longer than I haven't. And when you are collaborating on a project together with someone with whom you've shared more than half your life with, and in friendship, there's a bond that extends beyond the music or the script or the story, and that bond also like finds its way in a meta sort of way into the show. I mean, like I knew why the characters were on the screen. I knew why he had written them in the screen. I knew sort of his own experiences with the loss of his own mother, and so when you're scoring that show, for me, I was scoring it for him,
Yeah.
and so that was special, and a wonderful experience that I think we're going to get to replicate again soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are you sworn to silence on what that replication is going to be?
Yes,
Too bad.
but it's something very special that he's working on now, and so I've sort of already been writing themes for it, and we're sort of, I mean, I've seen the first
How
script
great.
the
Not that
and
you're hurting for work. You seem to be juggling a lot of projects at once these days. You also worked on the limited series Welcome to Chippendales, the Reese Witherspoon, Ashton Kutcher rom-com Your
yeah,
Place or Mine, the ABC crime drama The Company You Keep.
yeah,
Feature is it Gomahar?
yeah, yeah.
Gomahar, the last season, and Nancy Drew, and that's all in addition to Only Murders and Rabbit Hole. You're all over the place.
Yeah, I thanks for noticing. All that
I'm the
happened.
keeper of your resume.
And I have a great team, and there are wonderful composers that work on my team, that help and assist, and we work together, and they bring so much to the table. I'm also doing what I was doing while you were breeding for Freeform, with my right hand Alan DeMoss, and so. Some of these shows the shows you mentioned specifically are ones that I collaborate with people on my team. Only Murders and Rabbit Hole, I did those shows myself, but like myself meaning like I wrote those scores, myself. But the other ones are collaborations and in a different way, and I have a wonderful team that helps, and that's why we're able to do all that.
Listening closely, and I was listening closely to your stuff the last few days. I I think I can detect Indian roots and influences in your work. Is
Yeah.
that always a conscious thing for you?
It's absolutely unconscious because it's just like it's in my DNA. My parents were born in India, and they came to this country as if immigrants in the late '70s, and then I lived in India when I was a kid. My grandparents raised me for the first couple of years when I was born. My parents sent me back to India to be raised by my grandparents while they tried to get their footing here. It was a very tough time as new immigrants, as you can imagine. And they came to this country with $8. So, they, I, from a very young age, I was exposed to Hindi music from films and television, from films basically, which is where you get so much of your music from in India is from films, and um, and I grew up singing Hindi music. I was the kid in temple on Sundays, you know. Um,
Wow.
है मेरे प्यारे वतन है मेरे रा 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 रा. I sang old Hindi music as a kid, and so it's in my blood, and so it's sort of like it's hard to take it out. But um, there's definitely moments where I'm bringing it in. It's just subtle, you know.
Have you been told this before that you
Yeah.
that
I mean, This Is Us was a very, very Indian score. I mean, I mean, it was like, oh, oh, ah, da, 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 da. I mean, that's just like, that was the Big Jack theme from the show, and that's about as Indian as it gets. And Dan was like, Fogelman was like, go more, bring your child to do your thing. So that's where it was very Indian. Murders is not really. I mean, I don't think so. Nah.
I don't know. I think I sort of overheard that in a Bollywood feature once.
Maybe murders. I mean, I could imagine an old Hindi song going, maybe, like, I mean, you could. It's there. The bones are there.
What there's no question why you seem like to be a go-to composer for Indian themed projects too. Um,
I don't know if I am. I maybe. I mean, there's a Hindi film that I did this year, my first film in India ever. Um, and I know people have been reaching out for some time about me doing it, and it had to be the right project. There's so much stuff that comes out of India, so much great stuff too, and you just have to find which ones are
yeah.
the really good ones. And that film was Gulmohar was an excellent film.
Well, with that, Sid, we're out of time and need to say goodbye. Sid Khosla, thanks so much for giving us some of your valuable time today. This has been charming and so much fun. I felt like I got a concert as well as an interview. And You can hear his melodic creations on Only Murders in the Building over Hulu and Rabbit Hole over Paramount Plus. Good luck this Emmy season to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your time and kind words. Appreciate it.